All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Friday Ramblings. This one's going to be, unfortunately, one of our more low-key and sad ramblings today because we're going to be taking a moment to remember the passing of two great wrestlers. Two people that I'm big fans of. And I'm recording this very soon after I heard the news, especially of the second gentleman we'll be talking about. So it is still very raw and real, and that's part of why we're going to go ahead and do this now, because, it's part of me kind of like going, really, this happened? Like, it's going to help me as much as it's going to help, I think, a lot of people. And we're doing both at once because I feel like both these men need to be honored, and I could do a full video on either one of these men, but I don't know if I could really compose myself if I talk about either one of these gentlemen too long. And also, I don't want to have too many videos in too short a span that are, as I said, kind of low-key and not our usual fare. I've said before that Roulette Productions is generally about making people think about things that are entertaining and joyful. As we say here, there's a lot of negativity on the internet, and we try not to add any more of that, but this is just, as I've done in the past in a couple other videos, it's just something that has to be said. So let's get into it, and then we'll get back to our regular programming next week. But so first up is the first of the two gentlemen that passed, although only by about 24 hours or so. And that is Terry Funk. Born June 30th, 1944, and passed on August 23rd, 2023. And he wrestled the bulk of his life. He was a second-generation wrestler. His father was Dory Funk Sr., who was an incredible wrestler in his own right and promoter. And Terry, of course, had his brother Dory Funk Jr., who Terry often tagged with. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. But yeah, Terry wrestled basically his entire adult life, except for the last couple of years here, where his health finally just got too bad, and he physically wasn't capable of wrestling, which says a lot, because one of the things Terry was known for was being one of the toughest men in the business, in that he worked hurt. He worked some brutal matches where he got legitimately physically injured and just kept going. He was a good old Texan boy. And, for those of you who are not familiar with American stereotypes, good old born and bred Texan boys are tougher than shoe leather. I mean, just straight up, and that was Terry Funk. Terry wrestled all over the world. All Japan Pro Wrestling, International Wrestling Association in Japan, Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling in Japan, aka FMW. In America, he wrestled for ECW, USWA, WCW, WWF, all over the old NWA territories, especially Big Time Wrestling. Well, what was originally known as Big Time Wrestling is more famously known as World Class. There was another Big Time Wrestling up in Detroit. But yeah, World Class, I should say. Championship Wrestling from Florida, the Graham territory run by Mike Graham. Georgia Championship Wrestling. Stampede Wrestling up in Canada with the Hearts. And of course, he was the promoter of Western State Sports, professional wrestling promotion, which was based in his hometown of Amarillo, Texas. Technically he was born in Hammond, Indiana, but his family relocated to Amarillo when Terry was very young. So he is a Texan boy. Which is all good. But the Western State Sports promotion was actually started by his father, and he started his career in 1965, so at the age of 21, and worked against Sputnik Monroe in his debut match, who was a very famous wrestler in his own right, especially in the Memphis, Tennessee territories. Sputnik is famous for helping break the racial segregation in wrestling in previous decades, which is, a wonderful thing. Also competed against people like Ernie Ladd, often tagging with his brother, Dory Jr. That's one of those things, is their tag team, off and on tag team, was around since basically the guys began their career. Most people really know Terry from when he started working in Championship Wrestling from Florida, where in '75 he won his first NWA World Heavyweight Championship from Jack Briscoe. It was originally supposed to be for Dory, but Dory failed to appear, so Terry got the match and the win. He held the belt for 14 months, defending it in North America, Australia, Japan, and Singapore. Eventually being defeated by Handsome Harley Race. So, no harm in losing to a guy like Harley Race. Harley's an all-time great as well as Terry. Terry would then go on to Continental Wrestling Association in Memphis, where he feuded with Jerry Lawler, including the most famous of all the empty arena matches. The only people in the arena was Lance Russell, a cameraman, and a photographer. The confrontation only lasted a few minutes, however, due to the intense brutality of the match, and ended with Funk trying to put Lawler's eye out with a broken 2x4. Lawler, however, kicked Funk's elbow, causing him to hit the broken 2x4 into his own eye. Obviously not really legitimately, but that was the ending angle, the way the match was booked. But it was a famous match because it was, as I said, it was short, but it was incredibly intense and emotionally charged and brutal. And, of course, that ending featuring Terry screaming about how Lawler put out his eyeball being a famous moment in it. And, of course, it was aired on TV because that's why they had the cameraman present. Terry's biggest run would be his off and on tours of all Japan, which he did from the early 70s through the early 90s. Fighting people like the Sheik, Abdullah the Butcher, Stan Hansen, Bruiser Brody, and Giant Baba, often with tagging with his brother Dory Jr. Funk had a couple different runs in WWF. The first one was a very brief run where he would be known for carrying a branding iron to the ring, threatening to use it to brand his opponents. Funk once again teamed with his brother Dory, who was called Haas Funk, and they were managed by Jimmy Hart. WWF decided to, in order to keep things unpredictable and chaotic, give them a fictional brother called Jimmy Jack Funk, who was in reality Jesse Barr, a wrestler well known in Florida. Jimmy Jack would infamously wear a mask to help disguise his identity, since he was, as I said, an already established wrestler from Florida. But it was one of those things that did not endear Terry and Dory to the WWF system. They would fight Tito and Junkyard Dog at WrestleMania 2. Terry also had a series of WWF title matches against Hulk Hogan. However, as we said, he left after about a year due to issues with management and their booking. Later, he would have another short run in WCW. As part of the JTEX Corporation, he feuded with Ric Flair over the NWA Championship, accusing Terry Funk of, quote, spending time in Hollywood due to Funk having had supporting roles in a couple different movies. Funk took it personally, and the feud was on. Ultimately, Flair and Funk feud would involve many other great wrestlers, such as Great Muta and Sting, before being settled in an I Quit match at Clash of the Champions 9, which Funk lost after yelling, "Yes, I quit," after Flair put on the figure 4 leg lock. This feud was infamous for Funk using a legitimate plastic shopping bag to try to suffocate Flair on television. After this match, Funk would then become a color commentator and interviewer. However, this was only for a few more months before leaving to go back to Japan. He would then resurface in 1994, becoming a member of Colonel Robert Parker's stud stable, feuding with Dusty and his son Dustin Rhodes, as well as the Nasty Boys. But, you know, it is Funk being Funk. Basically picking a fight with anybody and everybody. The most infamous era of Funk's career, though, would be in the mid-90s when he went to ECW. Up to this point, at least here in America, while he would get crazy, such as trying to suffocate Flair, Funk had always stuck to the classic technical wrestling style by and large. He was known for, you know, much like his brother Dory and his father and many other classic NWA champions, for wrestling, you know, it's like, yeah, he could be tough, he could throw a punch, but, you know, he wrestled that classic style. However, Funk had always done things a little brutally in Japan. This was one of the things that foreign, especially American wrestlers, were often brought to Japan to do, and that is be these scary foreign bad guy monsters. And part of that was Funk got to be as brutal as anybody in Japan got to be. So with ECW, once known as Eastern Championship Wrestling, becoming Extreme, Funk brought that style full-blown into America, helping pioneer that hardcore style that would put the Extreme in ECW. It also had the advantage of stretching out Funk's career as a major player in American wrestling, because he not only showed he could still hang with wrestlers much younger than him, but that he could adapt his style to whatever the current young audience wanted to see. Funk would wrestle many famous matches in ECW, including bringing in his brother Dory for a barbed wire match against Public Enemy, and feuding with Cactus Jack, aka Mankind, aka McFoley, Shane Douglas, Sandman, Sabu, and after a while, Terry's own protege, Tommy Dreamer. Basically, everybody who was worth knowing in ECW feuded with Terry. Funk even headlined the first pay-per-view Barely Legal, winning the ECW World Heavyweight Championship from Raven, after defeating Sandman and Stevie Richards in a triple threat match earlier in the night. Ultimately, in 1997, a show was held in Funk's hometown of Amarillo called Terry Funk's WrestleFest, celebrating the legacy of the entire Funk family. Terry lost to then WWF champion Bret Hart in the main event in a non-title match. During the night, Paul Heyman would present Terry with his own copy of the ECW Championship, declaring that he was the lifetime ECW World Heavyweight Champion as a gesture of respect and thanks. It should be noted, one of the amusing points of this match with Bret Hart is that Bret and Terry actually had a pretty intense shouting match about how the match would go, because Bret respected Terry so much, and knowing that this was a show all about the Funk legacy, did not want to lose to Funk. But Funk, recognizing Bret was the WWF champion, which at that time was the biggest company in the world, and that, as the quote often goes, it never hurts to lose to the champion, wanted to put Bret over because Terry understood the business. So the two of them had the only argument in the history of pro wrestling, because the champ did not want to lose to the challenger, and the challenger refused to beat the champion. Neither side wanted to be the winner. Have you ever heard in wrestling about somebody, especially a guy who's world champion in in a large promotion, not wanting to beat somebody else, and the contender having the same attitude? People argue all the time about who's going to lose, but they both wanted to lose because of respect they had. As we said at the top of the thing, Terry worked in Stampede Wrestling for Bret's father, Stu. They both came from wrestling families. They understood the business. Bret felt that in a show that was all about celebrating Terry's career and the career of his father and brother, it would be wrong to beat Terry. But Terry recognized Bret was currently positioned as the greatest wrestler in the world, and there was no reason for Terry to beat him, that it would only hurt Bret's draw as champion. It's an incredible thing to ponder, folks. I mean, legitimately. And the joke is, wrestling's scripted, nobody really wins. But when your money comes from the belief the fans have in you as a draw, which is why people want to be the champ, because you're perceived by the fans to be the best, and they'll spend the most money on to see you and buy your merchandise, yada yada. I mean, that's just an incredible thing to ponder. But that was Terry. He cared more about what was best for the WWF's business and Bret's business than he did, a match on a show he promoted. It was all about celebrating the Funk family. Still, this would lead to Funk appearing in the 1997 Royal Rumble match. Or not leading to, but in the same year, Funk appeared in the 1997 Royal Rumble match in number 24 before being eliminated by his rival / real-life good buddy, Mankind. Briefly returned to ECW before announcing a retirement that lasted just 11 days before returning to the ring in Japan with FMW and on the U.S. independent circuit. Funk eventually rejoined the WWF and debuted under the identity of Chainsaw Charlie, although the fans all knew who he was, and even the announcers acknowledged it when they heard the fans chanting Terry. As Chainsaw Charlie, he teamed with Mick Foley, who was currently using the Cactus Jack persona, to feud with the tag team champion New Age Outlaws. Eventually, their team would win the tag team titles, but only for a single day. And Funk would, shortly thereafter, ditch the well, I can't even really say mask. It was a pair of pantyhose. He was going for like the classic Hollywood bandit thing. Pull the stockings over your face for a makeshift disguise. It was a weird gimmick. Terry's claimed that he wanted to do the gimmick as a way of kind of trying something a little different. A lot of people, blame the WWF for, they have to gimmick up everybody. But, in the end, Chainsaw Charlie, and yes, he did carry a chainsaw with him. There was no chain to it, but it did have the engine in it. It did run. And Terry would comment that as he was revving it up and swinging it around, he would actually, on a couple occasions, some of the gasoline would leak out and land on him, which got kind of scary when the chainsaw would occasionally spark. But it would not be the first time Terry had caught himself on fire in wrestling. That is a story from Japan that Mick Foley has told excellently in his first book. I will leave that to Mick to tell. Please consult his first book for that story. Still, eventually, Funk would begin wrestling as himself, forming a tag team with Too Cold Scorpio, who, amusingly, had previously been known as Flash Funk, no relation. In this sense, Funk being used as Disco Funky. However, the team did not last long themselves. Ultimately, Funk would lose to Foley in a Falls Count Anywhere match, and Mark Henry in a King of the Ring qualifying match, before briefly teaming up with Bradshaw. Before Bradshaw himself would turn on Funk and later on team with Farouk to form the Acolyte / the APA. One of the most infamous moments in Funk's WWF run would be when he ran out during the Undertaker Mankind Hell in a Cell match, because when he went through the cage and landed in the ring far below, legitimately knocked himself out. Terry ran out to make sure Mick was still alive, because it was actually technically an unplanned fall. The cage gave way sooner than it was supposed to, so Mick was not really intending to fall the way he did. It's a very awkward match. We're not going to go too detail into it, but Terry did what he had to do to keep the show going. He went out, checked on Mick, and then bowed up and let the Undertaker knock him out in order to buy Mick the few more minutes he needed to regain consciousness and finish the match. So there you go. That's, as I said before, this was what made Terry Funk so iconic. He would do anything for the business, and he knew enough of the business to know, okay, Mick's alive, he's answering me, okay, we got to call an audible in the ring. I need to bump for The Undertaker for a minute or two till Mick can get to his feet. Funk would then return to ECW, ultimately feuding with Tommy Dreamer, and would leave ECW after falling ill, surfacing in WCW for its last year and a half, winning the WCW Hardcore Championship 3 times, as well as the United States Heavyweight Championship for the 2nd time, and serving as commissioner. He would then later tour the independent circuit, showing up in Ring of Honor, Major League Wrestling, and some other places, as well as working the ECW nostalgia show Hardcore Homecoming, before showing up in NWA TNA, as well as making various guest appearances from 2006 to 2016 for WWE, including at the later ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, teaming with Tommy Dreamer and Beulah McGillicuddy against Foley, Edge, and Lita. In 2009, of course, Terry Funk, along with his brother Dory, was inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame by Dusty Rhodes. And in 2013, Funk would induct Mick Foley in turn. As we said, Funk would continue to wrestle up through 2017 on various independent circuits before, as we said, his health started going bad on him. Funk would appear in several video games, as well as we said, having a famous appearance in the movie Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze in 1989. In the On the Mat wrestling documentary, cameraman filmed him going to a medical appointment where he was told by a doctor that he should not even be able to walk due to the intense pain his body must be in because of the life of bump taking he had gone through and the various injuries he had worked through. Terry did not deny he was in intense pain, but he was walking and working anyway. So real brief, let's get into Terry's personal life. Funk married his wife Vicky Ann in August of 1965. They have 2 daughters together. Vicky herself would die on March 29th, 2019. Funk was also close friends with NFL player John Ayers and Sylvester Stallone. And the last couple years of his life was said to be living with dementia, and had spent some of that time living in an assisted living facility, although he did return home by the end of 2021. This is where things get fun. Personally, I came to know Terry first through the WWF late 90s run as Chainsaw Charlie, and then of course as himself. However, during that time I started catching old matches of his from WCW, and of course, as with the rise of the internet, stuff from Japan. And it's just, I mean, it's like I said at the top of the show, or at the top of this chat here, is Terry lived his entire life in the business, and he knew the business like no other. He was, to this, I mean, pretty much everybody in the business will tell you Terry Funk is one of the greatest. And it's not just because of his in-ring work. Nobody had a bad word to say about Terry. Many in the business affectionately referred to him as Uncle Terry because he spent a lot of his career, especially starting in the 90s, developing young talent and putting them over on camera, losing feuds and big matches to them, because he understood that was what was best for the business, and it gave him a lot of joy to take guys that had potential and help them find that potential. You know, Terry never stopped giving back to the fans and to the industry, putting his body through hell. But he did it all without any bitterness. He did it without any regrets. He didn't demand special treatment as a living legend. He was always one of the boys. And for that, more than anything else, for always giving back to the business, even when he was in a locker room full of guys that respected him so much that they would have gladly lost to him at a moment's notice without question. You know, Terry didn't take advantage of that like a lot of veterans have been known to do. Terry never wanted to be this invincible god kind of veteran. He wanted to grow the business at all times. Alright, this one's going to be a little shorter because unfortunately this gentleman did not have the long career that Terry did. We're going to talk about, as of when I'm recording this, a gentleman who died earlier this day. It was seeing this that really prompted me to make this video. Wyndham Lawrence Rotunda, born May 23rd, 1987, died, as I said, I was recording today, August 24th, 2023, best known as Bray Wyatt. Wyndham was a third-generation professional wrestler. His grandfather was Blackjack Mulligan. His father was Mike Rotunda, aka Michael Wall Street, aka IRS, the evil tax accountant. Occasionally Captain Mike. As well as two of his uncles, Barry and Kendall Wyndham. And his younger brother, Taylor Rotunda, best known as Bo Dallas. All of them were part of the wrestling business. So Bray, when he entered the career, was basically wrestling royalty. Especially because of Blackjack and Mike. Okay, we're going to go through this really super quick, mostly because, again, this one's a little more fresh on my mind, and as I said, unfortunately, there's not, he didn't have nearly as many years as he should have in the business or in life. He started wrestling in 2008, 2009 in WWE's developmental tour of Florida Championship Wrestling. Originally using the name Alex Rotundo, later Duke Rotundo, would team up with his brother Bo. Would later be called up to the main roster through the original version of NXT, which was basically a game show, reality show. It was their attempts to redo the concept of Tough Enough, where a bunch of rookies would try to win a competition to get fast-tracked to the main roster. He competed there under the name Husky Harris. He did not win that season of NXT, but would later compete as part of the NXT-inspired stable, the Nexus. Ultimately, teaming more often than not with Michael McGillicuddy, who was also a dynastic wrestler known as Curtis Axel from the Hennig family. During this time, he would compete in a lot of Nexus matches before eventually being drummed out of the group by Randy Orton, who attacked Harris using the skull punt maneuver that Randy used back in the day as a way to write people off television. They kind of quit using after, concussion protocols became a thing, because running cross ring and kicking a guy in the skull doesn't really have the same vibe to it as it used, now that we know more about what brain damage does to people. He would then return to FCW, where he would portray the Husky Harris character for a while before coming up with the character of Bray Wyatt. Initially associating with Eli Cottonwood before he would, after suffering a torn pectoral muscle, creating the Wyatt family, debuting Luke Harper as his, quote, first son, and later introducing Eric Rowan. The Wyatt family, which was essentially a backwoods cult, with Bray Wyatt as the leader, often sitting in a rocking chair watching Eric and Luke destroy people, would terrorize NXT, including Harper and Rowan winning the tag team championships. Eventually, they were all called up to the main roster together, and the Wyatt family would run roughshod over the roster for a few years. Again, we're not going to go through a super detailed run here of the Wyatt family. I may do that on a later date, because Luke Harper, who is no longer with us as well, and Eric Rowan, they all deserve their time in the sun, but we will say the Wyatt family had a lot of ups and downs, and spent a lot of time in pay-per-views, feuding with people like Randy Orton, John Cena, Sheamus, R-Truth, Drew McIntyre, Jinder Mahal, Heath Slater, CM Punk, The Shield, leading to Bray having his a match against John Cena at WrestleMania, specifically WrestleMania 30, with Bray and Cena feuding after that when Cena won at WrestleMania. This being the feud that led to the infamous use of the song, he's got the whole world in his hands, being sung by a choir of children, and eventually just one child in particular, in a very creepy manner, to unhinge John Cena, who of course as a character was often shown as being very good role model for kids and kid friendly. So having the children turn on him was a great psychological game from Bray. Eventually, Cena would win the feud with a last man standing match. Bray would go on to feud with Chris Jericho. Before subsequently breaking up the Wyatt family and focusing on singles feuds, referring to himself as the new face of fear, feuding with Dean Ambrose before targeting The Undertaker for a match at WrestleMania 31. Wyatt would lose to The Undertaker. However, this was seen as a very early sign that, Bray was somebody the WWE was showing long-term investment in, as he was working with The Undertaker, and was portrayed as somebody whose own mind games were about equal to that of the iconic Undertaker. Wyatt would later reunite the Wyatt family, during which time they would assault Randy Orton again. Randy would subsequently join the family and then betray them, breaking them apart, as all part of his master plan. Wyatt and Orton would feud over the World Championship before the Orton-Wyatt feud concluding with a non-title House of Horrors match at Payback. We would subsequently see Wyatt rebrand himself as the Eater of Worlds, where after some months of continuing to compete in solo work, he would, including feuding with Finn Balor, Wyatt had that feud end early due to an illness concern. Eventually, by the end of the year, though, he would begin teaming with Matt Hardy after they feuded, Matt having brought his broken Hardy character from TNA in, and the two engaging in a feud based on psychological warfare. As I started to say, they would later team up, winning the tag team titles. And during this period, Wyatt would also win Bray Wyatt would also win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royale. Or no, excuse me, he helped Matt Hardy win the Battle Royale. Blah, 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 leading to them winning the Raw Tag Team Championship together. Sorry, I'm trying to read my notes and not dwell too much on the fact that we're talking about this, because Bray is now gone. Eventually they would lose their titles. Before Hardy took time off to heal his injuries, would later leave WWE, and Bray would disappear from television before returning in what is probably the most infamous and iconic of his solo turns, which is The Fiend. The Fiend is... The idea was that you would have Bray in a kind of send-up of Mr. Rogers and other public access children's television shows. He would do vignettes that with various puppets, some of which were symbolic of his own previous career. He had a pig named Husky as a reference to Husky Harris, and the fact that he had issues with his weight off and on, as well as a witch named that was a reference to Sister Abigail, the alleged inspiration behind the Wyatt family and their twisted pseudo-religious lifestyle. And a few others but the idea is he would interact with them and initially acted as if he was this harmless person, this pacifist, and was just out to help the children. However, after a couple of vignettes, he began hinting that the evil was still in him, but he had done something with it. He had transformed the evil so it would not guide his life. And that is what became the Fiend, which is how Bray wrestled most of the time when he did wrestle. The Fiend was a masked gimmick, and most of his angles centered around him taking out people he had feuded with under previous gimmicks, such as Finn Balor and Randy Orton. Again, I'm not going to go super into the Fiend stuff, but the biggest nature of it, though, is it was an incredibly well-received gimmick, gave Bray a lot of creative freedom, and would see him wrestle. Not all the matches were received very well. The nature of the character was kind of a throwback to the first couple of years of the Undertaker character, where he was portrayed more as an undead zombie. So it did not really show Bray at his athletic best, and the in-ring work wasn't the best, but the character itself was so over, and Bray portrayed it so well, especially through the Firefly Funhouse vignettes, that, for a lot of people like myself, who had been a fan of Bray since he had first hit the main roster, it made me an even bigger fan of his, because I was like, this is the next phase of Bray's character. This is the evolution of his thing. This is something he can do where, even if he's not physically able to wrestle, he can do the vignettes. He can be as creepy as he wants. And even though the character of the Fiend was originally designed to be more to heel, it got over so much that he became a de facto babyface. The Fiend would later become one of, if not the best merchandise seller for WWE. Especially the Fiend masks, which I actually, hold on, I've got... here. See, this was the face that Bray would wrestle under. This was all of the evil inside him brought to life. You can see what I was saying about an incredibly creepy character. Had a very classic horror movie vibe, of which Bray was said to be a big fan of. Put that right there for now. But it was two things that led to the end of the Fiend character, and that was, at least storyline wise, that was the corruption of Alexa Bliss, who became his sidekick and paramour, and the renewed feud with Randy Orton. Randy setting Bray on fire, although he would return for WrestleMania match in which he was turned on by Alexa Bliss. Originally, it looked like this was going to set up kind of the next era of the Fiend character. However, Bray would subsequently not compete. Bliss declared she no longer needed Bray and that she was her own evil. Wyatt would have a Firefly's Funhouse segment in which, under his cheery kid show host persona, he declared he was looking forward to a fresh start and did not take things too personally. He was fired from the company, although that did not last long, lasting about a little over a year before he returned under a gimmick of just Bray after a series of vignettes, mostly centering around a white rabbit. He would show up at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view in the closing minutes as himself, accompanied by wrestlers dressed up as the puppets from the Firefly Funhouse, now apparently brought to life as full characters. He would subsequently cut promos declaring that he was a better man, including making apparently legitimate comments about how in real life he had gone through some personal problems, and that the support of the fans through social media is what had kept him going and inspired him, cementing him as a babyface. He would have one match under this persona after months of promos and build-up against LA Knight in a Mountain Dew Pitch Black match, which was a very interesting gimmicky match, used a lot of black light. But one of the other hallmarks of this was, besides the live-action versions of his puppets, we were introduced to a character who would show up in his vignettes as well as in the ring, a wrestler generally assumed to be by the fans Bo Dallas, aka his brother in real life, and as wearing a mask and getup to make him look like an old man that was referred to as Uncle Howdy. At the end of the Pitch Black match, Uncle Howdy, who seemed to be both against and for Bray, cemented an alliance with Bray by attacking LA Knight after Bray won the Pitch Black match. The kind of culmination of all this, we don't really know. After the match with LA Knight, Bray had begun setting up an angle with Bobby Lashley at WrestleMania. However, the match was pulled. Initially, their story was that... Okay, this part gets a little awkward. Initially, it was said that Bray was having creative differences, and so the match was canceled because he was arguing with creative about how the feud with Bobby Lashley and the future of the Bray character was supposed to go with the Wyatt 7, referring to the various puppets as well as Uncle Howdy and Bray himself. Would go long term. Later, it was said that this was downplayed and it was said to be a general mental health issue, harkening back to his on-air statements about having gone through a lot in recent years. However, a few weeks ago, it was stated that he had actually been seriously physically ill, that he had been dealing with a publicly unsaid life-threatening illness. However, it was assumed he had worked past it, and rumors said he was getting ready to return to the ring and return to this most recent incarnation of his Bray Wyatt character, or possibly a new variant given the several months that had passed since we had seen him, and his habit of always wanting to go forward and introduce new layers and aspects. However, that never happened, as despite the fact that it looked like everything was getting better, he suddenly died. Bray's career, as I've kind of hinted in this, was a very kind of back and forth one. He was always praised for his in-ring work, his promo work, while his in-ring work was never exactly the best in the company, but his in-ring work complemented his character. He was famous for, as Bray Wyatt, he would bend over backwards and stare at his opponent in an unsettling image. He did this both as cult leader Bray Wyatt and in his later Fiend incarnations, and of course the Eater of Worlds era. But nobody ever faulted his creativity. Nobody ever faulted his ability to grab the attention of the audience through promos and vignettes. Many people, especially during the initial Wyatt family era, pegged him as the next Undertaker. That creepy, pseudo-supernatural character that, whether babyface or heel, could be a character that the company was built around because he could feud with anybody. This was a character whose motivations could never be 100% understood and saw no loyalty to anybody but his own minions. Real quick, we'll go through his accomplishments. He won the WWE Championship one time at in an Elimination Chamber match. He's two-time Universal Champion, Raw Tag Team Champion, with Matt Hardy. Won the SmackDown Tag Championship with Randy Orton and Luke Harper during that era of the Wyatt family. And won the WWE Year-End Award for Male Wrestler of the Year in 2019. Was also, as we said, Florida Championship Wrestling tag team champion with his brother Bo Rotunda. He had, in his personal life, he had been married twice. Has 2 daughters from his first marriage and a son from his second, and was Godfather, or excuse me, God, it's this one time I can't. His son's godfather is wrestler Braun Strowman, who was part of some of the later incarnations of the Wyatt family. God, I can't believe I skipped over Braun. That's how hard this is. I can't keep my mind straight. Being as a wrestling fan, I think we're going to call it this one because this has been a very long episode, but I said it's kind of a 2-in-1. I could have spent this long just talking about Terry Funk, but God bless Uncle Terry. As a wrestling fan, I've always liked very vivid, unique characters. Somebody that I can't find in movies or comic books or video games, and something that can only exist in pro wrestling. And that was all incarnations of the Bray Wyatt character. Every time Bray was out with an injury or was resting his character for creative reboot, refresh, I eagerly anticipated what he would do next. During the year plus he was fired, there were rumors that he was going to be working on some horror movies and stuff. That was something I looked forward to. Quick trivia fact, the Fiend mask was partially designed by Tom Savini, who has been behind the character design and mask design of several horror icons, including Jason Voorhees. Bray and Tom did work on a few different projects as part of the Bray character, which is pretty awesome to consider. That had Bray had the option and desire through Tom, he could have very easily broken in to the horror film industry and probably would have made some very unique movies. But yeah, when he was fired, I thought it was a huge mistake. I was glad to hear he was rehired. Again, some of his booking was not the best. Some of that can be attributed to his health, him getting injured when he really didn't need to be injured, and some of it being the nature of his character and the fact it was like, well, we really need this guy to win, but the nature of his characters is it's really hard to have those characters lose. So it was kind of a catch-22 situation a lot of times with his booking, but at the end of the day, anything Bray did on camera, you could tell he was given 100%. He enjoyed what he did. And I mean, it's like we said, he's got a family that now do not have him, and we're going through things with him being ill these past several months, and I feel for them. 3 children. His wife JoJo. They're what matter right now. They are who needs all of our sympathy, and it's a horrible thing. So I mean, I said the man was 39 years old. He's a couple years younger than I am. Or was it, God, 39? 30? Jesus, can't even. No, 30. God, 36. Yeah, he's younger than I am. Yeah, that's something very sobering. It was just, I'll keep my Fiend mask. I've got back here in the closet. I've got a Fiend Funko Pop. I've got some different Bray Wyatt shirts from a couple different eras. They'll stay with me. Won't be anytime soon, but I will, much like Terry as well, I will one day rewatch his matches. But just right now, whenever an entertainer or a writer, any kind of creator leaves us, the best thing the fan community can do is remember that they gave to the world. Terry, Bray, we appreciate everything you gave to the fans of professional wrestling. You both brought us a lot of entertainment and stirred up a lot of emotions. And for that, you will always be remembered, appreciated, and respected here at Roulette Productions. And to everybody in the Funk family and the Rotunda family, all my best wishes. And I appreciate everybody that's stuck with me. As I said, next week we'll go back to the good stuff. So tune in, and no matter what, anybody that watches and is a fan of Roulette Productions, we appreciate and respect you too. Good night, everybody.